Hey everybody, what's up? We're back again with the CBD Business Accelerator and CBD Business Success. We got a special guest, Brian Wallace, today from NowSourcing. Thanks for joining us, Brian.
Absolutely, Matt. Appreciate the opportunity to come on your show.
Oh yeah, man. And I was just on Facebook the other day and I saw you won a huge award for NowSourcing. And so congrats on that. And if you don't mind, if you can tell us what is NowSourcing and what do you guys do?
Sure. So NowSourcing is a content marketing agency that specializes in infographics, but a lot of people don't really understand if you just say that it makes infographics, because a lot of people are like, I can't just get a template on the internet or make my own in Canva in 30 minutes. And I like to remind people when it comes to the creative or technological fields or the press fields, whatever it isn't the deliverable of what you think that output is, it's what that asset is doing for you. So yes, anyone can make a rudimentary infographic, but is it going to win you press and sales and leads and overtake people in SEO? Probably not. So over the last 15 and a half years, the team and I here have specialized in really coming to a nexus point of almost 4 different industries. And there's things that I like and don't like about those industries. So we kind of kept the things that we like out of all of them and strung a line through all of them. So in short, that is high quality design. And a lot of design is good in theory, but sometimes designers are just kind of thinking in the clouds and they're not necessarily connecting things to specific areas of business, especially if it's an area of business that they don't know anything about. So let's say like the CBD industry, if you don't know the insiders and if you keep up on current legislation, which changes all the time, right? It's absurd how much you don't know or how your knowledge base even gets irrelevant very quickly. So
I barely know, and I'm in it every day.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even I feel like every time we're doing something, we have to make sure there's a refresher. What states are on board and what's criminalized, what's not, what do you need a prescription? Who knows, right? I mean, as we're recording this to when it goes live, it could even be different, right? So
that's what I say. The CBD industry is a moving target. It's the fastest industry. The cannabis industry just goes rocket fuel. It's crazy.
Right. And it's like, it's really matured in the last several years. I mean, we've been marketing stuff for what I would just call the cannabis space. I don't specifically say cannabis or CBD. I mean, there's a lot of different aspects to it for people that don't understand, even the hemp market. So a lot of stuff kind of falls collectively under cannabis. And, a decade ago when we were rocking this kind of stuff, the biggest thing that we were trying to do was trying to get this in front of mainstream media, but I feel like a lot of the industry didn't take itself seriously. So a lot of outsiders are like, oh, it's just a bunch of stoner memes and stuff like that. But nowadays, forget it. You've got all sorts of Wall Street in there and all that. But it's really finding that signal between, like I said, the design side, the content side, and then just like a special crosshairs of PR and SEO, because a lot of both sides of that equation leave stuff on the table. All right, where SEO might look for linked fundamentals and PR might only look for big name websites. But I think a lot of people don't take a step back and look at the holistic totality of what they're trying to do in a marketing campaign. And there's usually a bigger game for not just the immediate, but for the long term in what people are trying to attain.
And I love it. I love the way you explain that, man. It's much more than just an infographic, what you're doing. Like, this is way more sophisticated than that. So yeah, I love the way you broke that down.
Not my first time explaining it, but the short version of what I just said, a tagline or just a short explanation, if you will, of how we've explained it, in my opinion, better over the past few years, is that we make ideas better by making them simple, visual, and influential. Because really, you're not marketing infographics, you're marketing simplicity. There's a much bigger audience of people that, let's say, aren't in the CBD space because they think that they will be addicted to drugs or they don't trust it, or why would I do this? It's not over the counter, I mean, even though that sort of has been changing, right? So I feel like a lot of people, they don't abstract it a layer or 2 layers higher, where first you need to better redefine an industry. And often in a lot of industries where there is resistance or negative press or just a certain negative priming when things come up, there's a huge audience of people that aren't into the market that you're also trying to get on board. And a lot of that is the legitimacy through press and SEO.
Exactly. And yeah, it's funny. I saw somebody post on Facebook the other day, I have an opportunity in CBD. And a lot of people commented, what's CBD? And I was like, dang, still
Right.
a lot of
Why
people.
would anybody just assume? Right. And that's exactly it. When you're talking with a group of insiders, like this is going to a group of people specifically in the space on Facebook. So great if you're there, or if you're at like a very specific festival, or if you're at the normal conference or something like that. Sure, everybody knows everything that you're talking about. They know all the acronyms. But if you just went to any random city and ask 100 people on the street, there is no reason that everybody knows even that level of expertise. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say half of the people or more won't even know what CBD is. So that's why
Right.
we were talking before we jumped on the recording. Education is so important in the CBD industry, and one of the best ways to do that is through infographics, in my opinion. And because people don't have the attention span to read like a 10-page report or something like that, they just want a quickly broken down step-by-step explanation of what something is, maybe this cannabinoid or whatever it might be. And so I love infographics for that purpose. And like, you know, especially if you're targeting women and you're on Pinterest, I mean, I would be working with Brian and his team all day, just cranking the infographics.
It's the perfect aspect ratio on Pinterest. I mean, these things are made for it. What's interesting, before we go on, Matt, something I wanted to discuss there, a lot of people have the wrong idea about people reading and they don't have attention and all that. I have a couple things to say if I can soapbox for a minute, which I think
for
should
sure.
be valuable to the audience.
Yeah.
It's not that people lack the attention span of paying attention. They basically just have a better garbage filter because there's so much garbage on the internet. Because the same person that everybody, depending on what marketing stat that you're saying, that people have 2.7 seconds, or we have the 8-second attention span of a goldfish, whatever it is,
Yeah.
at the same rate, the same human will see some new series or movie on Netflix and they'll binge it for a whole weekend. So how is it that the same person with the same mind can spare hours on end? It's just because some things don't delight them enough at the start and they just get thrown out. The other thing that people don't realize when it comes to the internet, and this is not an insult to humanity, people don't read. I'm not calling us illiterate. I'm just saying the act of scanning through information on the internet is not reading. It is a completely different part of the brain that lights up differently. Jacob Nielsen said this probably 25, 30 years ago, commonly referred to as like the father of usability. He uses a completely different word because it's not reading. And I think you'll like the word. It's called chunking. So our brain is looking all over the place for visual separators. And guess what? Instead of having a gigantic long article that people get exhausted when they see this stack of text, if they see an infographic, it's going to be a little bit more approachable because we're selling simplicity to get attention for permission for more attention.
Yeah, and you're doing it in chunks with the infographic. It's like the perfect way to
read your brain. It's exactly helping you when you need it the most, because your brain is just screaming, oh no, there's all these things being marketed to me. What do I pay attention to? And then you see this thing, you're like, oh, this looks different. This looks colorful. And I think we're going to look at some different examples in a little bit. It just draws you in, whether you are an expert or an insider, or you don't really know a lot, but maybe you want to know a little bit more. It's just much more inviting because people don't want to feel stupid or left out just because they don't really know some of the basics of it or some of the more intermediate or advanced parts.
Exactly. And you know, besides Pinterest, I have a few ideas in my head, but where, as I would rather ask the expert, like, where are some other great places to disseminate infographics? Oh, no worries if you got to get your door.
I love working from home. Just 1 second.
Oh, no worries.
All right. Yep, there we go. Okay, we have a few folks over and some folks are coming in. So I think, again, when we look at a holistic side of marketing, when people think in a single dimension, they are completely missing the boat. A lot of people have their specialties and their expertise, so it's easy to understand why it falls out like that, right? So you have a Facebook group, so naturally you're going to have some love for Facebook, but sometimes Facebook is going to have a stranglehold on your audience and it's not going to show everything. So being overly reliant on one avenue of the internet is crazy because that's not how humanity thinks. So some people might be Pinterest people, some people might be Facebook people, some people might be TikTok people. But the reality is that very few people just go down one narrow lane. So as much as you're saying Pinterest is valuable and social signals and social traffic is great and the virality in them is quite good. It is completely missing the boat when you're looking, remember what I said, kind of those two waves, if you will, where the first one is getting that initial attention, but the goal should be to get interest and attention for the long term. So a lot of that is missed when you're not thinking about content showing up on other sites, whether it is on somebody's authoritative website, blog, news article, industry publications. Every industry has them, right? So then the longer term of the content, if everybody is linking to it and everybody's featuring it, and then they also share it on their social channels, the longer haul of this, when people are using Google for specific search intent, like where do I find high quality CBD or whatever other kinds of things that could be very competitive, not only is your site going to outrank other people, but the whole ripple effect of having this featured in all sorts of media is going to show. Whereas, with exceptions, of course, because it's hard to just have everything without exceptions, a lot of regular social posts are not going to show up in search results.
Yeah.
Like that. Some things will stand out. So like if you did certain kinds of posts on LinkedIn, they are indexed, but a lot of things are not. You'll see Pinterest specifically, some things when I'm just looking at just different random searches, I'll find all sorts of infographics resurging, but a lot of that could just be the latest activity feed where somebody's finding it new. I do find that people are finding our stuff years later, which is nice when you're thinking about the earned and organic and social and viral impact, as opposed to pay to play, shady areas of the internet, and just straight up advertising and paid ads, which are fine to an extent. But when we're working in a highly regulated market like this, where we've found success with this is that a lot of times it's not even an option. Out of nowhere, Facebook, Google, whoever will just say, no, this is drugs or whatever. No, we can't market it. And they don't want to take a risk, which is, we can talk about the pros and cons to that. I think it's sort of a limited way of viewing the world because we're not, we're talking about legal things here. So I'm not sure what everybody's going all up in arms about, but that just makes it that we should be more reliant on an organic, longer term strategy, as opposed to just thinking that paid is the way for everything.
I love that, man. You're echoing, even though I have an ad agency for CBD brands and we're #1 in the world, I tell everybody, unless you're at 100 grand a month, don't even waste your time running paid ads. You got to get
you're just going to get eaten alive and other people are going to outbid you. And if you don't have a brand yet, I think there's a lot of brand blindness when it comes to the space, because remember how you ask 100 random people on the street and a ton of them don't even know what CBD is? Yeah. Let's go a step lower, right? Ask the same 100 people on the street, name the top 5, 10 CBD brands, or better yet, name any CBD brand that you remember. People have no idea.
They might say Charlotte's Web, like that's it,
But really though, are they, right?
Yeah.
Unless they really know their stuff and they're like a very educated consumer and they have a lot of different choices and they've been at it for a long time, I think that it's still a wide open market, which is amazing. Great opportunity for lots of people. I think if people really went into building their brand instead of sourcing it from somebody and slapping another logo, whatever, don't even get me, this isn't therapy or a 5-hour-long show, but I think a lot of people are missing the game, that there really aren't, as much as there are established players, the market is still maturing. You can't get it everywhere, let alone the world, let alone this country. So it's insane how much bigger this space is going to get. We've been watching it for years, but the players, tomorrow's players, not like literally tomorrow, but years to come players, the titans of this industry might not even be there yet. And that's what I find fascinating about it.
I agree. Like, you look at Charlotte's Web 2 years ago, they had 16% of the market share. Now it's like 6%. Like there's just so many brands shooting arrows at them.
Yeah, and they're not even like losing. It's just that the pie's getting so much bigger, right? Yeah. Because some people might look at that like, oh, you've bled out 10%, but no, the pie is getting ridiculous. As you get all sorts of different state-by-state things and farm bill things change and all of that, it's anybody's game. And I think
I love that point because I see so many brands complaining it's oversaturated. I'm never going to make it. That kind of attitude. I'm just like, no way, we're just beginning.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you have like really intelligent quants and people that really kind of play the markets, and irrespective of an industry, whether they utilize the product or not, there are people that just watch gigantic world financial markets. And I think a lot of the smart money is still waiting for better availability, right? Because I mean, think about dispensaries a number of years ago. First they're fined, then they can't use banks, and then it's like a cash business, and then the feds come in and raid everything. Who's going to take that kind of risk? It's crazy. You can't even like have credit card processing, right? And we're not talking ancient history here when we're talking about stuff like this. So it's absurd how far we've come, but I think it's still entirely in its infancy. And I think that there are enough really smart folks out there that are just waiting for the right moment to really go at it. And then I think we'll see a lot of M&A. I think we'll see a lot of consolidation. We may see like major CPG and food brands just completely take over the market. So it's like everybody's looking at like, oh, who are all the insiders? And it's like, well, there's entire other industries that could eat this industry alive that could just come in and make all sorts of brands that already have the shelf space, that already know what they're doing. So
yeah, that's a scary thought. That's why you need to have a strong brand, people that are watching this.
What if Procter Gamble, which spends $7 billion a year in marketing and advertising, just shows up? What are you going to do then?
You better get acquired.
Yeah, exactly. And that could be the game. I think a lot of time P&G, if they see somebody that's coming fast, they'll just buy them. There was some deodorant brand they did like that. I know deodorant's not the same thing, but is it that different? I mean, it's all kind of the same category space.
Yep. Yeah, we say CBD is just an ingredient. Like
it's just an ingredient, right? Yeah,
just
so it's stuff that you invest in your body, just like other stuff. So I'm telling you, they bought, I forget what the name of the place was. We could look at it later if you have show notes or something, but they must have done like a $200-300 million acquisition to just like knock them out. Because people don't realize like a lot of these places, they're category leaders. Like, you know, like eyeglasses are like this too. There's basically two companies that merged into a company that own everything. They have every brand of glasses, every eyeglass store you go into, you go see the eye doctor, and it's like they own the whole stack. And they make it feel like, because they don't market it under typically the category brand, that you have all this choice. And it's all this wild illusion of choice. So I wouldn't be surprised seeing stuff like that happen quickly too, because there could be different preferences and stuff where you could have super high grade things and I don't know, whatever. You get the point.
Yeah, I love that though. It gives hope for the industry. We're just beginning, people, and I'm going to show some examples here of some of the infographics Brian's company NowSourcing has done. Yeah, you see all my tabs here, Brian. We were talking about that.
Man, I feel like I'm looking at my own screen right now. Yep.
So here's one for mesothelioma treatment centers.org. Interesting. So why would a mesothelioma treatment center have a guide to marijuana strains?
Because a lot of folks see that there is a wide open market for hot trends. If it hasn't, I mean, again, I'm going back to the novice, to the entry point, because that's always good, because then everybody else could use a good explanation too. How many people really know their stuff when it comes to every strain? Or do they just select whatever's in front of them?
Yeah, most people don't. 90% don't.
Right? Like the wine market is like that. Everybody wants to be like this fancy wine connoisseur and they know everything, but they don't. Right? Yeah. So people really benefit a lot from having this kind of information. So I think where they were coming from was more of like a pain management thing, because we weren't, to your point, wanting to do something out of left field, but this did quite well and it got all over the place. This is already a few years ago, so things might have changed.
This is cool too. I mean, like, so yeah, for like so they're doing this for people that have cancer, right? Like to give them education.
Right. I mean, who do you think is using the product, right? This is directly dead center into the market. So it's like, it's a different way of looking into the door. But
I love it.
It's working. Yeah.
Yeah, I love to be able to educate cancer patients on the different strains and knowing what's going to work for them. And so this,
God forbid, you know, you're diagnosed with cancer. You're probably in emotional turmoil. You've no idea what to do. So are you really going to be sitting there like navigating all the different strains like you have all the time in the world? Of course not. So having things like this that could really summarize an industry for you help tremendously. Yeah.
Gotcha. That's cool. Here's another one on the green entrepreneur. And so do you guys write this copy as well, or you just do the
So that's a good question. And this, again, is one of those topics that we could spend multiple hours on. So we're really a good multi-tool, if you will, where we come up with ideas for clientele. We research them, we come up with the story, we come up with the narrative arcs, and we come up with the data. Also, if they have data and storylines and stuff, we can incorporate that, but we come up with what we call the blueprint. We then design these things, we implement them or help implement them on our client sites. And then we do a combination of writing and outreach. So within our PR, SEO, earned media category of stuff, part of it is we are working with existing relationships. And then it just really depends on what's happening with the editorial direction of those sites. So in some senses, I myself am a journalist and people entrust me to make things that are fair and biased and are sharing a particular subject. Other places say, pitch us on this and we like this a lot and we'll write our own idea of this. Other people say, this looks great, go write it up for us. So having the ability to have all of these assets at our disposal to very quickly suit it to fit for different publications is, I think, a big differentiator. Having something interesting instead of, here's a press release. Who cares about a press release, right? Yeah. And like everybody's going to magically run a press release and 500 sites are all going to have the same content and get thrown out of Google. It just doesn't work like that, right? So a lot of people don't really understand that those aren't real articles, they're not real links, and they're not really typically read by people. So unless you have an enormous publicly traded company, a lot of people just don't read stuff like that.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And here's one last one on Benzinga, which is a great source. If you don't check that out, people, you should check it out. It's good. Get on their email list. And so here's another one just talking about the growing industry and like that. It's funny. See, it's like you can do things like that with an infographic. You can make people laugh and entertain.
You can have a lot of fun through it and make it interesting, or go what I like to call going the distance throughout. So a lot of people, they might make one little nice little cute card graphic, but then there's nothing to it. This, anywhere you are, any slice of it, there's still something that's going to hold your attention and you'll learn about an entire market. And again, to your point on Benzinga, Benzinga is one of the largest sites on the internet and it powers financial markets all over the place. Benzinga has a massive amount of coverage when it comes to cannabis. It was probably one of the earlier places that really intertwined financial content with cannabis related content. So that syndicates to some other of the largest sites in the world. It's highly credible. And what you'll notice at the top, it said it's from the contributor staff. It's not just some press release or some sponsored article or something like that, which means that it is distributed differently. So at some point that was probably sitting on the homepage of the site, which is highly trafficked, actually syndicates out to other sites that are fairly read, and probably was leading the category of all the cannabis stuff that they were doing. So being on the back pages of a site in a way that is designed for people to never see it versus having it come out this way makes all the difference in the world.
Gotcha. And are you able to connect your clients? Like if somebody hires you to do the infographics and work with you, are you able to connect them to places like Benzinga for their...
Yeah, that's what you're looking at. Right, exactly. That's a lot of the times why people have us come to the table. Because again, if it wasn't for stuff like that, we would just be like a really expensive version of do it yourself or some kind of templates or tools. So yeah, again, coming with the end in mind, what is the actual deliverable for something is much more important than what does an infographic look like. We can spend lots of time thinking about what an infographic looks like and have all the right bones and structure of it, having the right topic. I feel like a lot of things fail because they fail to have and address an interesting topic. They don't have the right layers. They don't have the right data, or they just go data first and there's no emotion as a hook. But aside from the first two legs, which are very important to set it up for success, if you don't have any idea what you're doing on promotion, outreach, organic, links, PR, you're going to fail with the project, because you can have something that's amazing. And in today's world of 24/7 endless streams of media everywhere, like you can't even go up an elevator You can't go to the gas station without that thing screaming at you, right? So everybody's competing for your eyeballs and your ears. So the only solution is to really get out ahead of that and make sure that you have a lot of different media sources that you can connect this stuff to.
I love that, man. So people watching, this is something unique. It's not like Brian is just going to crank out an infographic for you. And here you go, just go on your own now. This is a structured, targeted approach. And so this is much more than any other infographic agency, most likely that I've ever seen. So this is good stuff. This is like a white glove approach, people.
Yes. Yeah, we have specifically been very narrow, but unlike a lot of people that go narrow in industry and wide on services, we're the opposite of that. We're wide on industry, so we know a lot of stuff. So I could get on a show like this for 12 different industries in a row and still have something to say that I won't sound like an outsider. So I can be available for press and comment and write competently because we've serviced so many different kinds of industries. But the tactics that we use cross a lot of different industries, which make it powerful too, because rather than, if you notice, when we were looking at the press, I got news for you, cannabis press didn't exist a number of years ago. So there's some stuff now, but it doesn't run the market. I think business outlets and finance outlets and technology outlets, if it's applicable, or green outlets, there's a lot of different things that can cross a lot of different kinds of publications. And that's what makes it powerful, because again, there's, with some exception, there are many avenues to get clientele that never thought that they were clientele, right? Getting this to the masses is a big problem of any relatively yet to be matured industry. And like we said, we're just getting started with this. So the more that you hit mainstream media, other sites of a lot of interest of the financial and the business and the technology, I would say business, finance, and tech is like this magic wheel that runs most press houses in the first place. And then there's just a lot of one-offs and derivatives off of that.
I love that, man, because like I said earlier, we always hammer it to our audience. CBD is just an ingredient. Don't be a CBD brand. Be a real brand with a real foundation. Don't hang your hat on an ingredient, you know. And so you can reach out to so many more people with a targeted approach. And so we talk about audience, message, product. Like most CBD brands, they only care about the product and they forget about the audience and message part, and they try to sell to everybody, and it just doesn't work like that. So we help them narrow it down, and working with you would be so powerful, man, to just reach out to those audiences that you know are going to be interested in what your brand has to say. And like, I was thinking about something like, if you had a CBD brand and you had a blog, like what percentage of your blog would have infographic articles?
That's a good question. So I think you can easily oversaturate your content library with too much of a thing. And not everybody's going to be an infographic person, just like everybody isn't a video person. There's a lot of video stuff that I find kind of annoying, honestly. I don't mean our video is cool, but I'm saying, think about how a lot of people disseminate and consume video. So they're going to see it on a stream or a feed, let's say Facebook, or let's say Instagram, or any of these places, or LinkedIn, right? So a lot of times you're on your phone and you're scrolling through. I'm not checking my email or something, I'm just straighting. So we're just scrolling through, and then you see a video, and then your brain is just kind of like, do I really have time to like sit and watch this video? Is it going to be interesting? So the thumbnail is going to be important. If it has captions, it's going to be important. And other people just scroll right past this kind of stuff. So I think it makes sense to have a healthy marketing mix and cadence of infographics. So if you're not blogging at all, and you're not doing anything on social, and you're not doing all the other things that you should be doing, like an email newsletter, all this different stuff, if you're just going to only count on infographic after infographic instead of other low-hanging fruit, like why not do a bunch of high-value blog posts and stuff? This is meant to be something not every day, but as part of a regular cadence. It's very much comes down to how much other content is happening, and do we have something interesting enough to make a gigantic long-form post of?
That makes sense. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And like with infographics, like how has infographics changed in the last 5 years, and where do you see them going in the future?
Sure. So let's go back a little bit and let's go forward a little bit from there.
Okay.
So we are one of the first groups in the entire world to do this as an industry. I know that there were other things that you could say, oh, they've been around for hundreds of years and people use them on maps, but I'm talking about the modern day infographic that is used for journalistic purposes and to explain things on the internet.
Yeah.
So we've been doing those since the middle of 2008, which is
Wow.
far before most people thought about it, heard about it. Then it got kind of a little bit crazy in like 2012, 2013. And there was a lot of like really bad work that was happening because everybody just, it was like a craze and everybody had
Yeah,
to.
Fiverr was doing them. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody just thought like, oh, this is the thing. So everybody got like a little too excited, and a lot of people that like honestly had no business making them, and they were cutting corners left and right. Not an interesting topic, no interesting story, really short. Probably would have been better to be like a really short listicle, right, kind of thing on your blog. Bad art, spelling, grammar, no sources, no media outreach, just all these crazy ideas. So there was this wave that was really annoying that everybody was trying to do it. And then a lot of websites kind of got done with it. Different people at Google were saying different things. So like a lot of people kind of stopped for a little bit. And then I'd say there was just a nice point where it started growing back. And then over the last few years, there's been like a ridiculously hard resurgence for the want of this because it's a better way for our brains to consume this. So that's a little bit of the past. As far as the future, everybody's always like, what about augmented reality and virtual reality and the metaverse and NFTs and every other buzzword we can think of? Well, I think that a lot of that world is coming, but we're still, as a society and just as a basic internet infrastructure perspective, we're still a little bit behind when it comes to that, because that has not replaced the current state of work, right? You and I are on video, which has existed for years. We're not showing up as metaverse characters, right? So if you actually break that down and you look at how many people actually use these things, tons of people have never experienced it all. And most people don't use it in their day-to-day activities. So, I mean, I'll tell you, like we pioneered the first virtual reality infographic in 2016. Wow. And I feel like there is not enough mass adoption. So when you're viewing your social feeds and your news and interacting with people, chances are you're not utilizing all these technologies. So I like to tell people, and they're a little shocked with this, we're intentionally behind or low-fi because the internet as a whole and humanity on a whole does not use all of this stuff to consume information. And hopefully they will. I'd like all this stuff to be more sophisticated. And then the other weird side of that question is, if you've ever been on the back end of the internet, you'll find that a lot of times it's kind of outdated and held together by bubble gum and Scotch tape. A lot of things cannot support all of these advanced experiences, right? Some sites can barely host an image. Some sites barely can put a video on. So we're trying to be good enough for the lowest common denominator of how people can get the message out all over the place. And it works well. So we're going to keep doing that until like the whole game goes up infrastructure wise, which is frustrating, but it's fine.
And that could be years away because you got guys like me. Sometimes I say I'm an analog guy in a digital world. So,
yeah, same. I mean, I feel like I'm old enough to kind of be at that juncture where I wasn't born as a digital native. I first saw the internet when I was towards the end of high school. Yeah. And, you know, I'm that last bridge gap generation. Everybody after me was pure internet, and everybody before me was pre-internet, and they had to learn it as adults. So
looking good, Brian. You look like you're 25, man.
That's just, you know, clean shaven. No, I'm actually turning 45. That's why I live in Ohio, where I have to have the stress of the coast. But yeah, it's anybody's guess how quickly society adopts all of this innovation. And there's no point in making content for the future that very few people will use to pick up and distribute. So yeah, that's just where we are.
That makes sense.
You can see my frustration with it, but at the same time, I'm not going to push the boundaries of what people can't do. It doesn't make sense. It's not a business model.
Yeah, and same thing with the CBD world. You know, we have to educate people and bring them up to where we are. Like, just because you're in it every day, like I have this disease called Me Too-itis. Like, if I know something, I think everybody knows it, and they're like, no, nobody knows this shit. Like, you
Don't know stuff. Right.
know. So yeah, you got to educate.
For granted. Yes.
Yeah, and Brian, you've had a lot of success as an entrepreneur. Like, what kind of advice would you give to a startup company where they're just like a mom and pop, or one or two people on the team, and they're just
Okay.
starting up? Like, what kind of advice would you give them?
So first, I usually tell people, don't be an entrepreneur. You're out of your mind. You're not ready for it. We laugh, but I literally say that. And a lot of people don't belong as being entrepreneurs. It doesn't mean that you come from a certain class of society and you have certain advantages. People come from all walks of life. Like the guy who started KFC, like started when he was like almost 70 years old.
Yeah,
So it can happen at any time, any age, anywhere on the planet. That's not the point. The point is, and I think this is a big misnomer about people who are subject matter experts and people who are entrepreneurs. They are not the same thing at all. You can be an entrepreneur with subject matter expertise, but if you only want to be a subject matter expert, stay in a place that will pay you predictably every 2 weeks. Because when you have to do sales and negotiate contracts and run payroll and deal with 1,000 things that could go wrong in the background, like I had, I was just playing it cool. The dog was barking and people were ringing the bell and I'm like doing hand signals and go on mute for a second. We didn't skip a beat because I'm an entrepreneur. Like everything's the battleground every day. And I anticipate it. I welcome it. If that's not the kind of personality you are, and you don't know how to get the message out there from a branding and marketing perspective, and you don't have any desire to sell yourself and sell the product or service, you're completely out of your depth. So
yeah,
you need to embrace those skills, whether you were born with them or not, learn them, embrace them, get better at them, or at least have a partner that does it. And guess what? Having a partner is kind of like being married. My partner and co-founder is my wife, so I don't have to have somebody totally different on it. But it's very hard to have different people, and then you have to split the pot and all that stuff. So that's not for the faint of heart either. And I'll lastly say, there's a good book by John Acuff called Quitter. And to ruin the book for everybody, basically, it's just saying you don't have to quit your day job. Like there's this glorification, like right now, there's the great resignation, like it's the cool and trendy thing to quit your job. That's nice. But at the same time, you're not independently wealthy, right? So you still have to pay the bills. So if you don't have a backup plan, you don't get bonus points for just like jumping off the ledge. It doesn't make any sense. So a lot of folks would probably do better to stay in their position, which probably would be okay with them having a side hustle of some sort. And then don't let your dream die, grow it slowly. And then there comes a point, certainly I had this point where I saw that the business was taking off. So I toned down or shut down other activities that were taking up more of my time. And I would say that's a lot of what you should do there. Yeah.
yeah, I like that, and that's a big issue with the CBD industry, especially because
Yeah.
people CBD will change their lives or a family member's life, and then they want to start a brand because of, oh man, it saved my life or it saved my mom's life
But
or
it's
whatever.
literally everyone's story. Most people didn't just say like, oh, I read about this in a magazine. It helped them. It helped their family. It helped their friends. And now I'm going to go do it for you. But
Yeah,
again, that's like almost a different thing. So that's not even, you're a subject matter expert. You're just passionate about something. And don't get me wrong. I think if you're not passionate about what you're doing as an entrepreneur, you'll probably fail. But just because you're passionate about something doesn't mean you're good at it. So
yeah,
yeah, all these
and,
people
and,
that
and
go
that's
straight
what.
first worry me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we have to do a lot of consulting and education with the people that own brands. And like I saw a huge need to start
Right.
consulting CBD brands back in 2018 because they just have the passion, but they don't have the sales knowledge or the marketing knowledge. And you're going to be dead in the water if you don't have that knowledge, like Brian was saying earlier. And so, one of the keys to that is having somebody like Brian on your team to help you disseminate this content. And you said it's like a battlefield. I say the same thing. I say every day is war in business. This is
Yeah.
war. We go to war, man. Like this is like every day I wake up with zero and I gotta make it happen, man. As an entrepreneur, the best definition I've ever heard is being an entrepreneur is like jumping off a cliff and building the airplane on the way down.
Sure is. Yep.
Exactly how it feels.
Since you like different allegories and examples, I'll throw one other at you. So Inc. magazine, INC magazine, a few years ago had a wonderful piece, and it's won awards and stuff, so it's pretty easy to find, called The Psychological Price of Being an Entrepreneur. I think they say Psychological Price of Entrepreneurship, I think is the title. So you'll know it because like there's this person that's like curled up in a fetal position on a mattress, like on an ocean. Sounds about right. Par for the course every day.
It's so very lonely too. Yeah, like you're
very,
out there.
It's very psychologically challenging, to say the least, and it can be really dark because you could have all sorts of people working for you and they're not in the same place. And I find that a lot of entrepreneurs hang out with other entrepreneurs and stuff, you know, and they talk about things like this. Not to ruin the entire article, but something that I thought was just a really good example in your mind's eye is the writer says that entrepreneurship is like riding a lion. Who in their right mind would ride a lion? Exactly, that's an entrepreneur. So society is like, wow, look at Matt and Brian and they're riding this lion, they're so cool. Meanwhile, like inside, we're just like, how did I get on this lion and how am I gonna not get eaten and stuff, right? So it's a really enjoyable and interesting read. Yeah.
I'm going to check that out for sure, Brian. And so everybody watching, check out nowsourcing.com. And then also, Brian, is there any other way if somebody has questions or they want to set up a meeting, or should they just go through the website?
Yeah, you can always book a meeting straight from the website in the top right corner. And since there's just, I don't even know how many thousands of people named Brian Wallace, although I am outranking some of them these days, I guess like I've just been linked to enough.
Nice.
You never know like which Brian Wallace you're going to get. Like there's been like politicians and athletes and all sorts of stuff. So I just go by NowSourcing on most social networks. So it's pretty easy to find me. I usually do most of my social content on LinkedIn for different reasons. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, I need to get back on LinkedIn. I've been slacking on that. I got a lot.
Yeah, you do. It's amazing. I mean, you know, we love you, Facebook. We know we're going to be broadcasting on there still. Solid for a business perspective.
That's awesome. And Brian, really appreciate you spending the time. And people watching, if you want more than just somebody to crank out a pretty looking infographic, which is cool, but if you want something way more than that, reach out to NowSourcing and Brian, because they're going to actually help you make a strategic plan with your infographics of where it's going to get disseminated and all that good stuff. So I trust Brian. I give him my stamp of approval 100%. And so reach out to him, people, and tell him I sent you, and we'll probably do another interview sometime in the future if you don't mind, Brian.
Yeah, I would love to. Appreciate that, man.
Yeah, I really enjoyed spending time with you, man. It's been fun, and we'll be back again soon, people. So once again, thanks, Brian, and it was really enjoyable to talk to you.
My pleasure. Thanks again for the opportunity.
All right, buddy. We'll see you again next time. Bye, everybody.
See ya.